I was sitting in the clinic's waiting area, flipping through an old magazine, when my phone rang. The caller ID said Lena, my only daughter. I smiled instinctively, but the moment I answered, something in her tone froze me. Mom, don't freak out, okay? We're flying to Europe tomorrow. I had to sell your lake cottage and your car. We needed the money for the move. You'll understand later. Bye. And just like that, she hung up. My hand trembled, but my heart didn't race. It just stopped for a second, then went painfully quiet. 43 years of motherhood, of sleepless nights and sacrifices, and she dismissed me like a bill she'd finally paid off. But instead of breaking down, I smiled. A strange, almost peaceful smile. Because what my sweet Lena didn't know could change everything. My name is Evelyn Price, 71 years old, recently widowed. 6 months earlier, my husband, Thomas, died suddenly over breakfast. One moment he was buttering toast, the next he was slumped forward, his coffee still steaming. His last words were, "Morning, my love." Since then, Lena had been visiting often, or so I thought. She organized the funeral, drove me to doctor appointments, even convinced me to get a full checkup. "You have to take care of yourself now, Mom," she'd say, with a gentle smile that used to warm me. Now I knew it had only masked calculation. The lake cottage she sold wasn't just a piece of property, it was our family's heart. Thomas and I bought it when Lena was 15, working double shifts to afford it. Every summer, we'd drive up with music blasting, Thomas humming off-key. It was where Lena learned to swim, where we celebrated her graduations, where she brought her first boyfriend. That cottage held a lifetime of laughter, love, and quiet sunsets. And now it was gone, converted into cash for an adventure that didn't include me. As for my car, an old navy blue Chevy Thomas had restored by hand, it still smelled faintly of his cologne. It was the last thing he'd ever polished on a Sunday afternoon. Selling it was like selling his memory. Still, I didn't cry. Not anymore. Because 3 days before he died, Thomas had handed me a sealed envelope and said quietly, "Evelyn, keep this safe. Open it when you're truly ready, not before." And now, sitting in that cold waiting room, I realized, maybe that time had come. That night, as I stood alone in my bedroom staring at the forgotten drawer, I had no idea the envelope inside would turn my heartbreak into power and my silence into vengeance. When I got home, I didn't take off my coat or make tea. I walked straight to my bedroom, the same one Thomas and I had shared for almost 5 decades. The late afternoon light poured through the curtains, soft and golden, illuminating every corner that still carried traces of him. The book on his nightstand, the sweater draped over the chair, the faint scent of cedar and aftershave. I opened the top drawer of my dresser, the one he had told me to use. There it was, a plain brown envelope with my name written on it in his neat, deliberate handwriting. For Evelyn. My hands trembled as I held it. 4 months after the funeral, I couldn't bear to touch anything that reminded me of him. I had avoided this envelope out of fear that it would make his absence more permanent. But now, after Lena's call, that fear was replaced by something stronger, curiosity mixed with quiet anger. I sat on the edge of the bed and carefully broke the seal. Inside were several documents and a folded letter. I unfolded the pages slowly. "My dearest Evelyn, if you are reading this, I'm no longer beside you, but I'm not gone. I've simply moved to a place where you can't see me yet. Over the years, I made some investments without telling you, not to deceive you, but to protect you. I wanted you to live free of worry, even if one day I wasn't around. Everything I've built, the properties, the accounts, the shares, they are all in your name. You are the sole owner of it all. But most importantly, there's one property I never told Lena about, the Maple Street building. You'll understand soon why I kept it secret. With love, Thomas." I stared at the words, stunned. My husband, the quiet mechanic who spent decades fixing other people's cars, had somehow built an empire behind closed doors. There were deeds, bank slips, certificates of ownership, and the Maple Street building, located downtown, a 20-unit apartment complex. My breath caught when I read the tenant list. At the top of the list, Lena and Eric Caldwell, my daughter and her husband. They had been living, unknowingly, in an apartment owned by me. The irony hit me so hard I almost laughed. Lena had just stolen my cottage and car, not realizing that the roof over her head already belonged to me. As I folded the letter back into the envelope, one thought burned in my mind. They thought they'd taken everything from me, but soon they would discover that I still owned the very ground beneath their feet. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Thomas's handwriting, steady, careful, full of love and secrets. The Maple Street building. I could hardly believe it. I'd passed by that block countless times, never knowing I owned half of it. By sunrise, I had made up my mind. I needed answers. Legal ones. Thomas always trusted his old friend and lawyer, Mr. Harlan Tate, a quiet man who had handled our modest affairs for decades. I hadn't seen him since the funeral, but I still had his number tucked inside my address book. When I called, his voice came through warm and calm, like nothing ever surprised him. "Mrs. Price, it's good to hear from you. How are you holding up?" "As well as one can," I replied. "Mr. Tate, I found some documents Thomas left behind. I think I need your help understanding them." He paused, and I could almost hear him straighten up in his chair. "I see. Do you have time to come in this afternoon? I believe your husband mentioned preparations before he passed." Preparations. That word chilled me. At 2 o'clock sharp, I walked into his office, an old brick building that smelled faintly of paper and pipe tobacco. Mr. Tate greeted me with genuine warmth. He was a tall, thin man with silver hair and eyes that missed nothing. We sat across from each other, and I handed him the envelope. He read quietly, his brow furrowing deeper with each page. Finally, he looked up. "Mrs. Price, your husband was far more strategic than you realize. These aren't just casual investments. Thomas structured a trust, entirely under your name. You are the legal owner of 7 properties, including the Maple Street building. And according to this, all transactions require your signature alone." I stared at him, speechless. "But Lena sold my cottage and car." "How?" "She couldn't have, legally at least," he said. "Unless she forged documents or used temporary power of attorney forms you signed without reading." The memory hit me like a wave. Weeks after the funeral, Lena had come over with a folder, insisting I sign some papers for probate convenience. I'd been so numb, I didn't even read them. Mr. Tate leaned back, watching me. "Mrs. Price, if she committed fraud, you can recover everything. Quietly, if you prefer." I took a deep breath. "Quietly, Mr. Tate. I don't want my daughter behind bars. I just want her to learn what she's thrown away." He nodded slowly. "Then you'll need patience and a plan." As I left his office, clutching the papers that proved my hidden power, one thought settled in my mind. I wouldn't confront Lena with anger. I would teach her, the way Thomas would have wanted, by letting her drown in her own greed before offering her a lifeline she didn't deserve. For the next 2 days, I walked around my house as if seeing it for the first time. Every corner whispered memories, laughter from long-ago dinners, the hum of Thomas's favorite jazz records, the scent of coffee that used to fill our mornings. But beneath all that nostalgia, something new stirred in me: clarity. Lena thought she had stripped me of everything, yet I held the deeds, the trust, and the power to turn the tables. For the first time in months, I didn't feel helpless. I felt awake. Mr. Tate called me the following morning. "Mrs. Price," he said, his tone careful, "I've reviewed all your husband's files. Everything is valid and properly documented. I can begin the process to reclaim the cottage and vehicle." "Do it quietly," I said. "And I want control over the Maple Street building, discreetly." He chuckled softly. You're more composed than most people I know in your situation. I've spent a lifetime staying calm while others made decisions for me, I replied. That ends now. After hanging up, I poured myself a cup of tea and stared out the window. Across the street, my neighbor Martha Lang waved, her eyes full of the same pity I'd seen since Thomas died. She crossed over with a pie in her hands, cinnamon apple, Thomas's favorite. "Oh, Evelyn," she said softly. "I heard about what Lena did. How could she sell your cottage like that? You must feel so lost." I forced a small smile. Lost, yes, but not defeated. Martha looked surprised. "You're taking this better than anyone would. I learned a long time ago that grief either buries you or teaches you how to breathe again," I said, gently taking the pie. That night, I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by Thomas's documents, sorting through every page. I found rental ledgers, financial statements, and something else tucked between two files, a handwritten note I'd never seen before. "If you ever feel betrayed, don't act in anger. Act in silence. People reveal themselves more clearly when they think you're powerless." It was signed, T. I read that line over and over, the words sinking deep into me like a quiet promise. Thomas had known. He'd known that someday I might face a test of loyalty, and he'd left me the tools to pass it. By midnight, I had a plan. I would not chase Lena, call her, or confront her. I would let her believe she had won, right up until the day I took back everything she thought was hers. As I blew out the kitchen candle, I whispered into the dark, "You took my kindness for weakness, Lena, but soon, you'll see what your mother is truly capable of." 3 mornings later, Mr. Tate called. "Mrs. Price, I have good news. The sale of the lake cottage was invalid. The buyers were unaware of the fraud, so the transaction has been nullified. The property is yours again." I closed my eyes, a wave of relief mixed with bitterness washing over me. "Thank you, Mr. Tate. And the car?" He hesitated. "That's more complicated. Your daughter used a temporary power of attorney you signed after your husband's death. We can contest it, but it will take time." I remember that day vividly now. Lena sitting at the table with her polished smile, saying softly, "Mom, this will just help me sort out Dad's estate faster." I had signed without reading. Grief had blinded me. Love had made me careless. "Do whatever it takes," I said firmly. "I want everything back, even the smallest thing that was mine." After hanging up, I felt something change inside me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about respect. For myself, for Thomas, for the years we'd built something from nothing. That afternoon, I took the bus to the lake cottage. The ride was long and quiet, giving me time to think. When I arrived, the air smelled like salt and pine, the same scent that had once defined our summers. The house stood just as I remembered it, cream-colored with blue shutters, sunlight glinting off the porch rails. An older man was sitting on the steps, talking to a real estate agent. I waited until they finished, then approached. "Beautiful property," he said, smiling politely. "Shame about what happened. I heard the owner had to sell because she was very ill." I blinked. "Ill?" "Yes, that's what her daughter told everyone. Poor woman, must have been hard for her." The lie hit harder than the theft itself. Lena hadn't just taken my home, she'd rewritten my story to make it easier to sell. "Things aren't always what they seem," I said quietly, and walked away. As I stood by the lakeshore, I could almost see Thomas there, barefoot, grinning, holding 2 fishing rods. "Don't let them turn you bitter, Evie," he'd always say. "Be calm. But when you act, act smart." That night, I wrote my first letter to Mr. Tate by hand, outlining every step I wanted him to take. No courts yet. No noise. Just quiet recovery, and quiet payback. As I sealed the letter, I smiled to myself. The world still thought I was a helpless widow, But soon, even my daughter would realize that nothing is more dangerous than a woman who's done being betrayed. 2 weeks passed quietly, each day bringing new paperwork from Mr. Tate and new strength to my resolve. Officially, I was still the forgotten widow everyone pitied. In secret, I was regaining everything Thomas and I had built, brick by brick, signature by signature. One morning, as I reviewed the latest envelope from Mr. Tate, I found a new document stamped in blue ink: transfer of property, Maple Street Building. It was official now. I had full, direct control of the entire complex, including the apartment my daughter and her husband lived in. I sat for a long time staring at their names on the tenant list: Lena and Eric Caldwell. Rent overdue, maintenance fees unpaid, eviction warning pending. The irony made me smile. My daughter had kicked me out of my home while living rent-free in mine. That afternoon, I decided to visit the building. I hadn't been there since Thomas was alive. The moment I arrived, I understood why he'd bought it. Red brick walls, tall oak doors, sunlight spilling into the narrow courtyard. It wasn't fancy, but it was stable, solid, just like him. The superintendent, a kind man named Mr. Ramos, recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Price, my condolences again for Mr. Thomas. He was a good man." "Thank you, Mr. Ramos. I'm here to check the management papers. And please, keep my visit quiet." He nodded, eyes soft with respect. "Of course." As we walked through the hallway, I glanced up at apartment 4B, Lena's place. The blinds were closed, a suitcase visible by the window. They were probably preparing for that European business trip. "Mr. Ramos," I said, "what can you tell me about the tenants in 4B? He hesitated. "Nice couple at first. But lately, things have been tense. Loud arguments, late-night calls. I think they're having money trouble." Money trouble. That made me pause. Lena had always followed Eric's lead, convinced he was some financial genius. But if they were arguing about money while planning to flee the country, something didn't add up. "Do you know if they paid last month's rent?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, ma'am. They said funds were delayed, but I doubt that's true." When I left the building, I stood on the opposite sidewalk and looked up at the window again. Behind those curtains were the same people who believed I was powerless, people whose future now rested in my hands. That night, I called Mr. Tate. "When the tenants of 4B return from their trip," I said, "I want them to receive a formal letter. But not yet. Let them enjoy Europe first." He chuckled. "I see. A lesson in timing." "Exactly. I want them to taste the calm before the storm." As I hung up the phone, I couldn't help but think, when they came back, my daughter wouldn't just face her debts. She'd come home to find out that her mother was her new landlord. A week later, I received a discreet envelope from Mr. Tate. Inside were financial summaries of all the properties, but one document stood out: a tenant credit report for Eric Caldwell. At first glance, it seemed ordinary. But halfway down the page, my breath caught. Multiple loans, overdrawn credit cards, late payments, and one note scribbled in red ink by the accountant: "High-risk borrower, recommended legal notice pending." So Eric, the man who'd convinced my daughter to sell everything I owned, was drowning in debt. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, the papers spread before me. It made sense now: their sudden European business trip, the rush to liquidate assets, the fake smile in Lena's voice when she called me. It wasn't about adventure. It was about escape. Thomas's words echoed in my mind: people reveal themselves when they think you're powerless. The next morning, I met Mr. Tate downtown at his office. He'd already done his homework. "Mrs. Price," he said, adjusting his glasses, "your instincts were correct. Mr. Caldwell has several outstanding debts with local lenders. He's used falsified collateral documents, including the apartment on Maple Street, which, as we know, is actually yours. My stomach tightened. He used my building to get loans? Apparently so. The lenders believe he's the owner because of falsified signatures and outdated records. Once we update the title and notify the bank, those loans become invalid. But it will hit him like a storm when they find out. I leaned back, letting the information sink in. Then let's make sure the storm arrives right on schedule. Mr. Tate looked at me for a long moment, then smiled faintly. You're not what people think, Mrs. Price. No, I said. Not anymore. That afternoon, I stopped by a small diner where Lena and Eric often had lunch, a place Thomas and I had once taken them when they were newlyweds. The waitress, a sweet girl named June, still recognized me. Oh, Mrs. Price, I haven't seen you in ages. Your daughter was in here a few weeks ago. Looked upset. They argued over something about a bank account. He left first. She cried a bit and paid the bill with his card. I thanked her politely, hiding my turmoil behind a calm smile. So the cracks had already begun. My daughter wasn't just betraying me, she was living in a collapsing world built by lies. As I walked home, the autumn wind stung my cheeks, and I felt something stirring in my chest. Not anger, not grief, but purpose. I finally knew how to use their own greed to teach them a lesson they'd never forget. When I reached my doorstep, I whispered into the wind, "You wanted freedom, Lena? Then I'll give it to you. But first, I'll take away every illusion that ever made you feel safe." Mr. Tate called me early one morning, his voice brisk with excitement. "Mrs. Price, the transfer paperwork is complete. You now have full legal authority over every property Thomas left, including the Maple Street building and the Lake Cottage." I let the words settle in like sunlight on cold skin. For the first time since Thomas's death, I felt in control of my life again. "Perfect," I said. "And the matter with Eric's forged documents?" "Nearly resolved," he replied. "Once I file the updated ownership titles, the lenders will realize Eric's signatures are invalid. But may I ask, do you intend to press charges?" I paused, smiling faintly. "No, Mr. Tate, not yet. Some lessons must be learned in silence." After hanging up, I poured myself coffee and walked through the house, barefoot on the wooden floors. The morning felt different. Not sad, not heavy. More like the beginning of a chess game where I already knew the ending. I spent the day drafting letters and sorting papers, all signed under my maiden name, Evelyn Moore, so nothing traced directly back to me. Every letter was a step in a quiet dance of reclaiming. The first went to the property registrar, the second to the bank, and the third to a private investigator Mr. Tate recommended. His name was Cal Daniels, a former police officer with a reputation for discretion. When we met at a small cafe that afternoon, he listened quietly as I explained my situation. "So, you want to know everything about your son-in-law," he said finally. "Finances, associates, foreign accounts, the works?" "Everything," I said. "And keep my name out of it. I'm just a curious widow." He smirked. "Curiosity like that usually burns someone in the end. But you seem like the kind who lights the match on purpose." By sunset, our deal was sealed. Within a week, Cal promised to dig up every skeleton in Eric's closet, and judging by what we already knew, there would be plenty. That night, as I sat on my porch with a cup of tea, the sky turning the color of bruised lilac, I thought about Lena. Somewhere in Europe, she was probably sipping champagne, believing her life was finally perfect, her debts forgotten, her conscience clear. But every empire built on deceit collapses eventually. I looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thomas, if you're watching, know this. I won't destroy her out of hate. I'll let her destroy herself, and I'll just open the door." The next morning, I received an unmarked envelope on my doorstep. No return address, just my name written in neat handwriting. Inside were photos of Eric in a Paris cafe, kissing a woman who wasn't my daughter. The envelope lay on my kitchen table like a secret daring to be opened. No sender, no note, just my name, written in sharp, deliberate strokes. I hesitated for a moment before sliding a knife under the flap. Inside were glossy photographs, Paris streets, a small café terrace, and at the center of them, Eric, my son-in-law, smiling, holding hands with a young brunette woman. In one photo, they were kissing. In another, he was showing her what looked like a set of plane tickets. There were at least 7 photos, each time-stamped, each one a dagger. My heart didn't race. It didn't even ache. It just steadied. Because now, I knew exactly what kind of man he really was, and what kind of web my daughter had been caught in. The phone rang that afternoon. It was Mr. Tate. "Mrs. Price," he began carefully, "I've received a call from the bank. One of the lenders noticed discrepancies in the Maple Street loan documents. They're investigating Eric's accounts." I almost laughed. So the trap is already closing. He hesitated. "If I may ask, would you like me to intervene to protect your daughter's name before things turn public?" I thought for a long moment. No, not yet. Let her return home first. She needs to see the cracks herself. After hanging up, I stared again at the photographs. The cafe in the background looked familiar, a place Thomas and I had once visited on our only trip to Europe decades ago. The thought stung like irony. My husband had saved our money carefully. Eric was spending it recklessly in the same city. That evening, I lit a candle by the window and let my mind wander back through the years. Lena as a little girl with pigtails and scraped knees, running through the garden with Thomas chasing after her. She'd always been stubborn, fiery, so much like him. But greed had twisted that spark into something colder, something that looked like ambition but smelled like vanity. When I finally blew out the candle, the house felt both heavier and clearer. The game was no longer about property or money, it was about truth. My daughter needed to see the man she'd chosen over her own blood. The next morning, I called Cal Daniels, the investigator. "Your pictures arrived," I said simply. He chuckled. "And that was only part 1, Mrs. Price. Wait until you see what he's been doing with your daughter's name." My grip tightened on the phone. "What do you mean?" "Let's just say, the loans in your son-in-law's file? Half of them were signed by your daughter." I froze. "But that's impossible." "Not impossible," he said grimly. "Just forged." As the line went silent, my world shifted again. Eric hadn't just betrayed my daughter, he had used her as a shield for his crimes. And when Lena discovered the truth, it wouldn't be the world that destroyed her, it would be her own choices. Cal arrived at my house the next morning carrying a slim black folder. He didn't bother with greetings, he just placed it on my table like a man handing over a confession. "I think you should see this before it hits anyone else's desk," he said. Inside were copies of bank documents, loan agreements, withdrawal slips, and investment authorizations, all bearing the same neat, slanted handwriting. Lena's handwriting. Or rather, something that looked like it. At first, my eyes refused to believe it. But when Cal placed a magnified printout beside it, the truth was clear. The signatures were imitations. Crude in some, frighteningly perfect in others. "Eric forged these," I whispered. He nodded. "Half the loans were taken under her name. Your daughter's legally responsible for every dollar, even if she didn't sign them." My heart clenched. "How much are we talking about?" "Roughly $200,000, he said. "Maybe more once penalties are added. But that's not the worst part. One of the private lenders has ties to very dangerous people." I sat back, the air leaving my lungs in a long, silent exhale. The house was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock. "So, if this goes public, Lena won't just lose her reputation," I said softly. "She could lose her freedom." "Exactly. And judging by their travel records, Eric's already planning to disappear permanently. He bought a one-way ticket to France, in his name only. My jaw tightened. And my daughter? Her return ticket is different. It's for 3 months later. He's leaving her behind. For a moment, the world tilted. All my anger dissolved, replaced by something colder, grief for the little girl I'd raised, the one who had no idea she was about to be abandoned in every sense of the word. What do you want to do? Cal asked quietly. I looked at him, my voice steady. We protect her. But she can't know it's me. Not yet. He nodded, understanding. I can prepare a dossier for your lawyer. That way, he can handle the cleanup quietly. When he left, I sat alone, staring at the forged signatures. Every stroke of that pen felt like a betrayal layered on another betrayal. Thomas's words came back to me. Act in silence, Evie. I folded the papers, placed them back in the envelope, and whispered, She's going to learn what love really looks like, not the kind that spoils, but the kind that saves in secret. That evening, as rain began to fall softly against the windows, I made a single phone call to Mr. Tate. Prepare everything, I said. When my daughter comes home, I want the truth waiting for her. The first storm doesn't come with thunder. It begins with silence, the kind that follows a phone call you wish you hadn't answered. 2 weeks after Cal's visit, I got an email from Mr. Tate. Subject: Updates on Europe. Attached were screenshots of financial alerts, frozen accounts, flagged transactions, and an urgent note from the French consulate. Eric Caldwell's assets had been seized pending investigation into fraudulent loans across multiple countries. It had begun. I could almost imagine Lena sitting in some rented apartment in Paris, her perfect vacation turning into confusion and panic. The card she relied on, declined. The hotel deposit, held. And the man she trusted, missing. Part of me wanted to pick up the phone, to hear her voice, to tell her it would be all right. But I remembered Thomas's letter, his warning, let silence do the teaching. Instead, I wrote back to Mr. Tate. Continue monitoring, but take no direct action yet. When she returns, she must come to me on her own. The next few days passed in a quiet rhythm. I baked, cleaned, and tended to my roses, pretending life was ordinary. But each time I looked at the petals falling one by one, I thought of Lena's world unraveling oceans away. On the 5th day, Mr. Tate called. Mrs. Price, I believe your daughter will be home soon. The airline confirmed a ticket from Paris under her name for next week. No return flight. A strange ache filled my chest. Relief, sorrow, and something sharper. Vindication. Then I'll be ready, I said softly. That evening, as I sat by the window, I found myself staring at an old photo album. There was Lena at 6, holding a seashell. At 12, beaming in her graduation dress. At 20, walking down the aisle beside Eric, eyes full of hope. How did we get here? Thomas once told me, children don't inherit our love, they inherit our lessons. Maybe I hadn't taught her strength, I'd only taught her comfort. And comfort, left unchecked, had turned her into someone who saw love as currency. Outside, rain began to fall again, tracing thin silver lines down the glass. I whispered into the dark, You're coming home, my girl, but not to the life you left behind. Before bed, I called Mr. Tate one last time. When she arrives, make sure the Maple Street building paperwork is finalized. I want the apartment lease in her name, with the rent due immediately. He hesitated. You're certain? Yes, I said. Let her live beneath what she sold away. It's poetic, don't you think? As I turned off the light, thunder finally rolled across the horizon, the storm I'd been waiting for. My daughter was coming home, broke, betrayed, and about to discover that the mother she deceived now owned the roof over her head. The morning Lena came home, the sky was pale and gray, the kind of color that never promises sunshine. I saw the taxi from my kitchen window before I heard the knock. She stepped out wearing the same beige coat she'd left in, only now it looked 2 sizes too big, wrinkled from travel, her hair pulled back without care. Her suitcase wobbled behind her, one wheel squeaking against the driveway. When I opened the door, our eyes met for the first time in months. "Mom!" Her voice broke halfway through the word. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't rush to hug her. Instead, I simply stepped aside. "Then come in." She entered slowly, her eyes darting around the house like it was both familiar and foreign. The same living room she'd once helped me decorate now looked smaller, or maybe she looked smaller, weighed down by invisible burdens. "Eric?" I asked softly. Her jaw tightened. "He's gone." I said nothing, letting silence stretch between us like a rope neither of us wanted to cut. She sank into the couch, her shoulders trembling. "He said he was going to fix things, but he left. Took my passport, Mom. My card stopped working, and her voice cracked. I had to borrow money from a stranger just to get home." A pang of pity flickered through me, but I buried it quickly. "Sit. You must be tired." I poured her tea, the same way I used to when she was little. 2 sugars, no milk. She looked at the cup for a long time before whispering, "I messed up, didn't I?" I didn't answer. Instead, I placed a small envelope on the table between us. "Mr. Tate dropped this off yesterday. You should read it." Her hands shook as she unfolded the document. Her eyes moved across the words, the Maple Street property deed, the trust papers, the notice of eviction addressed to her own name. Her lips parted. "I don't understand." "You don't have to," I said calmly. "Just know that everything you thought you owned, the apartment, the life you built, belongs to the woman you betrayed." Tears welled in her eyes. "Mom, I didn't know what Eric was doing. I thought—" "You thought you could fix your life by breaking mine," I interrupted quietly. "And now you've learned how fragile perfect really is." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Only the faint ticking of the clock filled the air. Then she whispered, almost pleading, "What are you going to do with me now?" I looked at her, the daughter I'd raised and the stranger she'd become, and said softly, "That depends, Lena. Are you ready to rebuild, or are you still waiting for someone else to save you?" Lena didn't speak for a long time after that. She just sat there, staring at the deed papers on the table as if they were written in a language she no longer understood. Finally, she looked up. "You're angry with me," she whispered. "I was," I said simply. "But anger fades. What comes after it matters more." Her eyes were swollen, her voice small. "I thought Eric could fix everything. He said Dad's investments were wasting away. He promised if I helped him sell the cottage and the car, we'd double the money. He said it was what Dad would have wanted." I felt my throat tighten, but I kept my tone steady. "Your father wanted honesty, Lena. Not shortcuts." Tears slid down her cheeks, but I didn't move to comfort her. "Not yet." After a moment, I stood and went to the drawer, the same one that had once held Thomas's letter. From it, I pulled out a small key attached to a tag marked Maple Street Office. I placed it on the table. "I've spoken to my lawyer. The apartment building downtown. You're living there again. But this time, you'll earn it." She blinked, confused. "Earn it?" "You'll manage it," I said. "Handle rent collection, maintenance reports, tenant concerns, everything. You'll start with the smallest tasks and work your way up. You'll receive a salary, not a share. Do that for 6 months, and we'll talk again." Her lips parted. "You want me to be your employee?" "No," I said quietly. "I want you to be someone your father would be proud of." She looked at the key for a long moment, then took it in trembling hands. "I don't deserve this chance," she murmured. "You don't," I agreed. "But I'm giving it to you anyway." For the first time, she met my eyes without flinching. There was something different there now. Not defiance, but exhaustion, and maybe a faint glimmer of humility. "I'll do it," she said. I nodded. "Good. You'll start Monday. Mr. Ramos will expect you at 9 sharp." After she left the room to rest, I sat alone for a long time. I wanted to believe she could change, that the lesson would stick. But somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that the story wasn't done. When the phone rang later that evening, that voice proved right. It was Cal, the investigator. "Mrs. Price," he said grimly, "I think you should see this. Eric isn't just guilty of fraud. He's also being investigated for identity theft, and one of the stolen names is your daughter's." I froze, the blood draining from my face. Forgiveness could wait, because while I was teaching my daughter a lesson, someone else was still out there using her name to destroy her completely. I met Cal at his office the next morning. The blinds were half closed, the smell of strong coffee lingering in the air. He looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from digging too deep into something rotten. "Tell me everything," I said as I sat down. He opened a folder, thick with printouts and photographs. "Eric wasn't just lying about money, Mrs. Price. He was laundering it, using offshore accounts under multiple names, and one of them was your daughter's. There's a record of fake IDs, bank cards, even a digital passport application in her name." My pulse quickened. So if the authorities trace those transactions, they'll come after Lena first, he finished grimly. And Eric's already vanished. He's filed for asylum in Monaco under another alias. By the time this reaches Interpol, he'll be untouchable. I sat back in my chair, staring at the wall. For all her greed and foolishness, my daughter didn't deserve prison for crimes she didn't commit. "Can you fix it?" I asked quietly. Cal nodded slowly. "I can bury the connection, but it'll take money and silence. A lot of both. Money I had. Silence I had mastered." "Do it," I said. "Whatever it costs, make sure her name stays clean." He hesitated. "You'd protect her after everything she's done?" I looked him straight in the eye. A mother doesn't stop protecting her child when she's wrong. She just changes how she does it. When I left his office, the sky was low and gray again, that same color it had been the day Lena came home. I walked through the drizzle, my umbrella forgotten in my hand. I wasn't angry anymore. I was something colder, sharper, resolved. By the time I got home, I had made my choice. Lena would never know how close she'd come to losing everything, not just her freedom, but her future. I would protect her in silence, and she would rebuild in ignorance. That was my punishment for her and my penance for myself. That night, I sat by the fire and called Mr. Tate. "I need to transfer a portion of my trust into an anonymous account," I said. "For what purpose?" "To correct a mistake, quietly." He didn't question me. He never did. When I hung up, I glanced at the small framed photograph on the mantel, Thomas holding Lena on his shoulders at the lake. His eyes seemed to meet mine even through the glass. "I know," I whispered. "You'd do the same." But just as I began to feel some measure of peace, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I answered, expecting Cal. Instead, a man's voice, smooth, unfamiliar, dangerous, said, "Mrs. Price, I think we need to talk about your daughter's debts. Eric promised us payment, in your name." My heart stopped. Whoever this man was, he knew far too much, and for the first time in months, I realized the danger wasn't just emotional anymore. It was real. The voice on the phone was calm, too calm. "Who is this?" I asked. "Let's just say I'm handling what your son-in-law couldn't," the man replied. His accent was faint, European maybe. "Eric Caldwell owes my employer a considerable amount of money. He used your daughter's name. And now that he's disappeared, the debt falls to her. I gripped the edge of the table, forcing my voice to remain steady. How much are we talking about? 275,000, he said smoothly. But we're reasonable people, Mrs. Price. We don't want trouble. We just want what's owed. My pulse thudded in my ears. If this is about Eric, contact the authorities. He chuckled, a low, chilling sound. The authorities don't understand private arrangements. Eric knew the risks. So does your daughter, whether she admits it or not. A pause. We know she's back home. You can reach her, yes. My heart clenched. If you come near her. Relax, he interrupted. We're not cruel. We only visit when people ignore us. I'm calling you first because I believe you're the smart one in the family. He hung up. For a long moment, I sat there in absolute silence, the dial tone humming like a warning. Then I stood, walked calmly to my desk, and called Mr. Tate. Did anyone reach out to you about Eric's debts? No, why? Because someone just did, and they're not bankers. He exhaled sharply. Mrs. Price, this could be dangerous. You should contact the police. No, I said quickly. Not yet. They don't have what they want, and I intend to keep it that way. After ending the call, I went upstairs and opened Thomas's old lockbox. Inside was everything I'd kept hidden: account ledgers, property bonds, the unregistered trust codes he'd written by hand. I traced my fingers along the ink. Thomas More Trust, confidential. That night, I barely slept. Every creak in the house sounded like footsteps. Every shadow felt like someone watching. I wasn't afraid for myself, only for Lena, who was sleeping peacefully down the hall, unaware of how close the storm was to our doorstep. At dawn, I called Cal. I got a call, I told him. Someone's coming for her debts. He was silent for a moment. Then you don't have time. We need to move her somewhere safe. I'll handle it quietly. Not yet, I said. If I run, they'll follow. If I pay, they'll come back. There's only one way to stop this. I need to find Eric first. Cal's tone hardened. You're walking into his mess, Mrs. Price. I'm not walking, I said, staring at the window. I'm hunting. As I ended the call, a message flashed on my phone, a photo sent from an unknown number. It showed my front gate at dawn, and a single red envelope taped to it. The air outside was sharp with dawn chill when I stepped onto the porch. The red envelope hung from the gate like a threat dressed as a valentine. No name this time, no address, just a wax seal pressed into the flap, the letter E carved in deep crimson. I carried it inside, laid it flat on the kitchen table, and stared at it for nearly a minute before opening it. Inside was a single photograph and a note written in block letters. The photograph was of Lena. She was leaving the Maple Street building, a coffee cup in one hand, her expression weary. The note beneath it read, "She owes us what Eric promised. 72 hours. No signature." I sat down slowly. Whoever they were, they knew where she worked, what time she left, even what she wore. This wasn't a bluff. It was surveillance. I called Cal immediately. They've sent a message, I said. They're watching her. He cursed under his breath. We need to move her now. Moving her will only confirm she's worth following, I replied. They want money. We'll give them something else first, a trail that leads away. Cal hesitated. You're planning something, aren't you? I'm planning to buy time. That afternoon, I drove to the Maple Street office. Lena looked startled when I appeared in the doorway. Mom? You're not supposed to be here. I know, I said calmly. But listen to me very carefully. If anyone strange asks questions about Eric or about money, you tell them nothing. You act like you know nothing. She frowned. What's going on? Just do as I say, I whispered. And never walk home alone. Her face paled, but she nodded. Back home, I gathered everything I could find on Eric. Emails, documents, the forged contracts. I spent hours scanning them, attaching them to a blank drive. When Cal arrived that evening, I handed it to him. Take this to your contact in Interpol, I said. Tell them an anonymous source is ready to trade evidence for protection. They'll think Eric sent it. Let them chase that ghost while I handle the living ones. He looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. You're playing a dangerous game, Mrs. Price. I'm just finishing what Thomas started, I said softly. He built protection through silence. I'll use it through action. When he left, I checked every window, every lock. Then I sat in the dark living room, the red envelope lying beside me. The house was silent except for the ticking clock, until my phone vibrated again. A new message. Nice move, Mrs. Price. You're smarter than Eric said. I stared at the glowing screen, my reflection caught in its light. Whoever they weren't guessing anymore. They were watching me. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. I spent the next day watching the street from behind the curtains, memorizing every unfamiliar car, every shadow that lingered too long. By afternoon, I knew what I had to do. Waiting for help wasn't in my nature. Thomas hadn't raised me to be the kind of woman who hid behind closed doors. So I decided to meet the wolves head-on. I called Cal first. I'm going to end this, I said. He sighed. Mrs. Price, if you mean to meet them. I don't mean to. I already have their attention. It's time I use it. That evening, I drove to an old diner near the industrial district. Neutral ground, quiet enough for a private meeting. I left my phone in the car and sat at a booth near the window, nursing a cup of coffee I never touched. Right on time, a man entered. Tall, dressed in dark gray, wearing gloves despite the warmth. His eyes found me immediately. Mrs. Price, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. You're braver than I expected. I studied him calmly. You wanted to talk. So talk. He smiled faintly. Your son-in-law promised us a large investment. He said his wife, your daughter, was the heiress to a considerable fortune. When he disappeared, we started asking questions. And imagine our surprise when we discovered you are the fortune. I see, I said quietly. So Eric sold you a story. Oh, he sold us more than that, the man said. He sold us access, account numbers, property records, yours. Clever man. Too bad he double-crossed us before leaving the country. I kept my breathing steady. And now you want me to clean up his mess. Let's not make it sound so harsh, he said, leaning forward. You're an intelligent woman. We don't need everything, just enough to close the ledger. Say, $500,000. I met his gaze without flinching. And if I refuse? He smiled. Then maybe your daughter has another accident. Cities are full of them, you know. For a moment, silence thickened between us. Then I reached into my purse and slid a flash drive across the table. That's what you're looking for, or at least, what you'll think you're looking for. Take it and disappear. He took it, studying my face carefully. You're too calm. I've lived long enough to know fear doesn't save anyone, I said. But planning does. He gave a slow, mocking bow. If you're lying, Mrs. Price, we'll be in touch. He left without another word. When he was gone, I dialed Cal from a payphone outside the diner. It's done, I said. They took the bait. What did you give them? He asked. A ghost file, full of false data, and a tracker hidden inside. As I hung up, my phone buzzed again, a live signal from the tracker lighting up on the screen. The dot was moving fast, heading straight for an airport. The tracker's signal blinked across my phone screen, a small red dot racing toward the city's private airfield. I called Cal immediately. "They're heading for the airport," I said. "Follow the signal." He was already in motion. "You understand what happens if this goes wrong?" "I do," I said softly. "But I'm not afraid of endings, only unfinished stories." By the time I arrived at the airfield, dusk had settled like smoke across the tarmac. Cal's car was parked by the gates, headlights off. He handed me a pair of binoculars without a word. Through the glass, I saw the man from the diner, tall, sharp, impatient, speaking with someone near a small charter jet. When the second figure turned, my heart stuttered. Eric. He looked thinner, unshaven, desperate. He was arguing, waving his hands. Even from a distance, I could see fear flickering across his face. "They found him," Cal whispered. "Not yet," I said. "Let them finish." The deal unraveled in front of us. Eric shouted something, pointed at the briefcase, then turned to run. The man raised a gun, but before he could aim, police lights flooded the tarmac. Cal exhaled. "Interpol's raid," he said. "Your tracker led them straight here." I watched as Eric was thrown to the ground, the flash drive slipping from his hand, the fake one I'd given them. A perfect ending to a story built on lies. Hours later, the report came through. Eric was in custody, facing charges across 3 countries. The organization he deceived was under federal investigation. And the threats, the phone calls, the envelopes, stopped. The next morning, Lena came downstairs, her hair still damp from the shower, her voice small. "Mom, I saw the news. Eric's been arrested." I looked up from my coffee. "I know." Her eyes filled with tears. "You knew, didn't you? You did something." "I did what a mother does," I said quietly. "I protected what was left of us." She took my hand. The first time in years she'd done it without expectation. "I don't deserve you." I smiled faintly. "Then spend your life proving me wrong." Outside, the sun was rising, warm, gold, and forgiving. I looked toward it and felt something loosen inside me. For the first time since Thomas's death, I wasn't haunted by silence. I was guided by it. I whispered, almost to myself, "It's over, my love." Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just waits. And that's how Evelyn turned betrayal into strength. Not with rage, but with patience. What would you have done in her place? Chosen revenge or forgiveness? If Evelyn's story moved you, share your thoughts below. Don't forget to subscribe to Vengeance Secrets, where every story hides a truth, and every truth comes with a price.